All right, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Robbie Rich from Young Harris College PD in Georgia. 28 years total in law enforcement. He served the last 5 as chief of police, and he's also a U.S. Army veteran for the military police. Welcome to the show, Chief
Thank you. I'm
Rich.
glad to
Thank you
be
so much
here.
for being here. I was telling you offline, I think you have the coolest name ever.
Thank you. Yeah, I get a lot of times. Are you related to Richie Rich? And I'm like, no, but that is pretty cool though.
Yeah. And you told me that, and I really appreciated this. You were like, hey, I know my title is chief, but at the end of the day, I'm Robbie. And I think that speaks volumes. And I appreciate that a lot to be able to connect on a human level with you or with anyone that I talk to. So thank you for saying that, and
You're
I think
welcome.
that it is important for us, and I think sometimes we have these barriers, and I've done this before too, where it's like, I try to give this perception of who I am based on where I am in my career, but to let those walls down and it be like at the end of the day, we're all just humans talking to each other. I think that
Mhm.
speaks volumes.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I know that you're passionate about, obviously, about what you do, but when you and I talked offline, some of the things that kind of stuck out to me that I wanted to bring up was your passion for creating a safe campus environment. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how you're doing that and why that's so important for you.
Yeah. First thing, I like to create like a personable relationship, even with the students and faculty and staff as well. Treat everybody with respect, and then to create an environment where people will want to talk to the police and
Mm.
stuff. I know this day and time, it's like police is taking a lot of bad rap and stuff like that. But I want to create a safe campus environment, and by doing that, it's going to let them come to me and let me know when something's going on, or to help keep them safe.
I feel like the thing that kind of popped up to me when you were saying that is also having a genuine want to do that and the authenticity to do that. Have you seen that play dividends, like where you have had those almost we call them like those investments, right? Like those you're investing in the community, you're wanting them to trust you in an
Mhm.
authentic way. Um, and then later on you were in a situation where they did trust you. Have you seen that firsthand?
Absolutely, and it's come into where we've had like calls of service with them and with the students and stuff, and by having that personal relationship, it's easier to de-escalate the situation at times. I mean, sometimes it's hard to, but I mean, but it's just I've seen multiple times it's been great.
Yeah. I've had this conversation before. I think it's really interesting that I do think that we will draw our own conclusions based on our own experiences. Maybe when we're younger, we'll listen to other people's opinions on things, but I think mostly, especially as we start to get older, we start to understand like my lived experience versus what other people are saying. And what I mean by that is, you know, I came from an environment when I was younger where I had a lot of interaction with law enforcement from my parents. So there was a lot of domestic violence in the household. My dad was using narcotics, so he was in and out for a decade for various reasons. And my experience with law enforcement was positive. And now here I am, fast forward, decades. I'm in this space where now I'm working in the law enforcement wellness space. And so when other people would give their opinion, I'm like, well, that wasn't my experience. Like my experience was actually really positive, and so the more I think we develop relationships, people can then start to draw their own conclusions based on the experiences that they had in their life, maybe not exactly, based on the noise that they're hearing in the media.
Right, right. And I learned it, when I was young, first starting out and stuff, it was just like, you know, I didn't see what I see now, but you got to treat everybody with respect and treat them with dignity, and you'll get better results in the end.
Yeah, 100%. I know that you also talked a lot about how can you support the mental wellness of the community that you serve. And I know that you are in college policing, and this is kind of that time in young people's lives where you start to see a lot of the mental health challenges coming about. And then how can you also support the mental health of your department and your team? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it all starts, what kind of officer you have working for you. To me, I've always said it takes a special person to be a college campus police, even like a school resource officer as well,
Mm.
because they're going to be dealing with the students, which is, young adults, and it makes a difference on down the road, and being able to see, what kind of problems and stuff are going on, and address it without, like, you don't want a hot-headed police officer coming in, and because it could mess up your whole thing going on at your office. And then, and officers too, you kind of, I work for a small department, so I can kind of see, I see a lot of my officers on a daily basis, because I call it, I'm a full time, I work the road chief, so I'm working, I'm hitting the streets just like they are on our campus.
Mm.
So we see each other almost every day, and I can see if something's going on, and we interact a lot, and so it's very helpful. And then if I see something going on, we'll pull aside and talk about it and figure out what's going on and find a solution to the problem.
Yeah. Are there special skill sets that you think officers who are in the school setting have that are maybe kind of like superpowers?
I do. A lot of it's just how you treat people. I've always been a firm believer. I keep saying this, but treat people how you want to be treated, and
Yeah.
and that helps you out in the end, because you can't just come in being like a super cop. And no, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that in certain settings, but a school setting, it's not going to help you. It's going to make your situation worse, and it probably end your career pretty soon on a college campus when you're policing like that.
Well, I think that when we think about treating people how you want to be treated or how you want your family to be treated, it takes a massive amount of emotional intelligence and empathy to be able to do that, right? To be able
Mhm.
to
Right.
look at a situation and say, how would I want to be treated in this moment? Or, hey, like maybe I can't relate to what they're going through right now, but I'm going to show up for them as if I can, because I want them to feel like there's someone here to support them. I think that takes a lot of skill. It takes a lot of practice, and there's some people I do believe it's trainable. I know some people will argue that, with me, which is fine. I'm open to a healthy, respectful debate about that. But I do think that empathy and having that emotional intelligence is something that we can train over time. I do think that some people maybe are more that way, just,
Mhm.
naturally and organically. But I do think that it takes a lot of skill to be able to look at other people, put yourself in their shoes, and show up for them in the way that you would want someone to show up for you.
Absolutely, because on a college campus, you have many different cultures and personalities going on, and
Mm,
so you have to learn to deal with each and every one of them.
mm. Yeah. Well, adaptability. And then also, I think, and this is really hard, and I'm sure that you know this too, being the leader of an organization where when you're dealing with people who come from different walks of life,
Mhm.
different personalities, different learning abilities, you have to be able to say one thing 100 different ways for
Mhm.
them to be able to grasp it and to understand. And that also takes a lot of skill and a lot of patience to be able to
Absolutely,
do
because
that.
we have a huge international,
Mm,
you know, students at our school, and so it's you got to learn their cultures and stuff too, so you're not, humiliating them or anything like that. Or, they may even come from somewhere where law enforcement is not appreciated at all, where they're actually pretty bad, so you
mhm.
just have to learn different things, and the way to treat people, and not let it get personal, is something, that to get in an altercation.
Yeah, that's difficult to not take things personally. Again, a lot of skill, a
Mhm.
lot of patience, emotional intelligence. Are there things that you look for when you're hiring, like specific maybe qualities in a person that you look for that you think would be a really good fit for that type of environment?
Yeah, I mean, I look at their background, where they've come from, what kind of policing they've done. I
Mm,
mean, and just and speaking with them, how their demeanor is, how they, how I want to perceive them is a lot how the students will perceive them, I think.
mm.
And I just, it's sometimes it's hard to describe, but it's, you know when you find the right one, and it's just, you know talking to them, and then just making sure, they have all the right answers that you're wanting to hear, and just crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, and maybe I'm guessing that you've thought of this too, but when you can create those positive experiences with someone who's young, then that's going to contribute to the future, I think, of the profession. Like I think of this sometimes because, and I don't think that people go out there thinking that that's what's going to happen. But if you come in and the students love you, they trust you, they might also want to be like you one
Mhm.
day. And so you're contributing to the future applicants of this profession by being able to build that relationship with them early on.
Absolutely.
How do you, as a leader of an organization, and this is not within the community in which you serve, but within your department, within your officers, how do you create an environment where wellness is a top priority and it's okay to ask for help? It's okay to need resources. I find this to be really, really interesting, especially in school policing, where you are taking a lot of mental health calls and a lot of those challenges within the community you serve. Um, and this idea of how do you make it okay for the helper to also know that it's okay to get help?
Right. I create a very friendly office environment. I kind of my leadership style. I kind of look at it as like a authentic leadership. I
Mm,
lead as a human first.
mm,
Um, I break stigma around the stress and mental health by just being friendly. I treat everybody the same. I don't want them to look at, I mean, I am their boss, I'm the chief of police there, but I'm also their brother or somebody to reach out to when something's going on, that we can help each other. I'm not the type that, I'm not going to get on to you when you're in trouble. I mean, I'm going to talk to you about it, but I'm not going to be screaming at you or anything like that, because that don't help anything.
yeah. You know, conversations with officers who have said that they have seen everything possible within, the community in which they serve. And they've been graphic with me, and I won't share that on here. I think everyone can kind of imagine the things that you see, as a law enforcement officer. But I've had a couple people in tears or holding back tears and saying that the most stress that they experience is organizational stress. It's not
Mhm.
necessarily like what they're dealing with out in the community. And so by focusing on that and creating an environment where like you guys are a team, and trying to reduce that stress as much as possible. What have you seen as kind of the ROI, if you will, of that? Do you find that there's more um, productivity, better morale, people want to be there, less sick time? What are you seeing as far as kind of the return? I'll put in the quotes like the return on investment for
Right.
creating that culture.
Well, all of the above. The morale's great. We all, we get along. We cut up. We're able to work better together as a team. When it matters the most. I have a great bunch of guys. We love each other. We work together. It's a great team.
Yeah. One of the things that you said to me that I think really stuck out is this like idea of maintaining a positive mindset throughout all of it. How did you train that and how do you train your team to look for the positive and, try to have maybe like gratitude for any given situation?
A lot of it was hard to train myself, because I was one that was always bad to look at the worst possible outcome possible, on
Mm,
certain things. And it was just very, very negative on my mental health at the time. That was, well, quite a while back. But then I just had to start training myself, just talking to, talking to myself, but just being like, hey, we can't do this. You got to to be more positive about things, look at a better outlook, and because it'll make you a happier person in the end, and then with my officers, just talking with them, and just making sure they understand that, that somebody's there for them and stuff like that.
I think it's really I've I've had those experiences too. And I think we all go through different phases in our life, some that are harder than others. And, I think to a certain extent, we do have to give ourselves grace sometimes,
Mhm.
but I think we have to hold ourselves accountable And we
Mhm.
also need other people who are going to hold us accountable.
Mhm.
And I think so often, and I'm guilt, everything I say on this podcast, I am guilty of myself. So there's never any judgment whatsoever. But in my most negative times, I just remember always blaming everyone and
Mhm.
everything else. It was like, this person's doing it wrong. They made this decision. And, it was always like pointing externally. And then there was a moment where I had to sit with myself and be like, okay, it's almost like that old adage when you say like you're pointing one finger out, there's like, three fingers pointing back at you, and you
Mhm.
have to like take that accountability. And I think that, there was kind of an aha moment for me where I'm like, okay, what is my role in all of this? Like it can't be that like everything else sucks and I'm just perfect. There has to
Mhm.
be something that, I am doing too, or a different way for me to look at the situation. And I do think you said that word training and mental training. It really is that. It's like first you have to have awareness around it, and sometimes it takes external awareness, where someone has to like shake you a little bit and be like, hey, you're being really negative. Like, what's
Mhm.
going on? Like everything is doom and gloom. But once you have that awareness that like, hey, I'm kind of in this vicious negative mental cycle, then how can we, kind of backtrack and start trying to counter that as much as we can? And I do think that there 95% of the time, I'll give us a little bit of grace, that there is always a different way or a more positive way to look at things, even if it's really, really hard.
Mhm.
And so, one of the things that I teach all the time, and I don't know if this is something that you did, but I had to start just every day practicing gratitude. And it could be something so silly. I actually asked someone today, I was like, what's the best thing that happened to you today? And they said, I ate lunch. And I was like, perfect. They were like, they're like, I had a break and I was able to eat lunch. And so sometimes it's like the little stuff that we can
Mhm.
just recognize, okay, like this is something that I'm grateful for. This is something that went really well. I try to start my day off that way, like set myself on a really positive foot. I've stopped looking at social media or emails until I have like my little routine that I do in the morning. And the excuse we get all the time is like, well, I don't have time to do that. And so I
Mhm.
always tell people, like, just do it while you're doing something else. Do it
Yeah.
while you're in the shower, do it while you're brushing your teeth, do it while you're commuting to work. And it takes 3 seconds for you to say, I like to say three things, but you could be like one to three things that are really good. And you have to like believe it. Like they have to be things where you're like, like I'm happy that, I don't know, I woke up and I got to sleep, an extra 5 minutes today or whatever it
Mhm.
is. And I think the more we can just have baby steps of like training ourselves to be more grateful and more positive, then you start to see those things happen more often. You start to see more positivity in your life. And the reverse is true. If you're always thinking about negative stuff, then you're going to start seeing only negative things.
Right. And you got to make time. You got to slow down and take time to for your mental health on that stuff.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I was thinking about this the other day because time is going by faster now. I don't know if you
Mhm.
feel that way, but I'm
Oh
like,
yeah, absolutely.
I cannot believe, like, I was just talking to someone, um, and she said that her baby was like 9 months old. And I was like, no, you just had your baby, and it's like crazy how fast time goes. And I was trying to understand why. And I think that we are just now in a society where there's so much distraction. When we
Mhm.
were younger, I remember like being bored. I remember like spending
Mhm.
summers where I'm like, I have absolutely nothing to do. And those days felt so long. Summers felt so long. We didn't have the constant distraction. And I agree with you. I think that we have to create space for ourselves. Waking up and immediately going on to Instagram or TikTok for 30 minutes, not the best
No, it
use of
sure
our time.
ain't.
It's distracting, right? So how
Mhm.
can we carve out that time? Like I'm almost like looking for opportunities to be bored so that
Mhm.
I can, think about like what are ways that I can be more productive? What are other things that I can do that are more creative? How can I focus on my own health and wellness? Because focusing on your health and wellness takes a lot of presence. It's
Mhm.
not distraction.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. My wife helps me out a lot with that. She's taught me along the way, about Robbie, you got to slow down. You got to take time for yourself,
Mhm.
and it's took a lot of time, but like I said, it was worth it in the end.
I want to talk about that because your wife is a clinician.
Mhm.
So, what are some of the things? I know you said slow down, but maybe what are some of the things that she's taught you that you've been able to now pass along to your team?
Yeah, I mean, she's taught me compassion, and like when I was younger, first starting out, I was just, wanting to write tickets, wanting to do all this stuff because I started out as a deputy sheriff, and then, but then, she just over the years has taught me, and just watching her work and how she treats people, and and the things she does. She started out kind of at the bottom of the totem pole in social services. She was a case manager, worked the street, worked the caseloads and stuff. Worked her way up from a social worker, and while going to school and doing all that, and she finally got her master's in social work, and she's able to do like therapy and stuff like that now. And so she's such a wonderful person, and she's been such it's so great. I'm so grateful to have her in my life.
I love that. And you can tell, if anyone's watching this, you can tell that that's so genuine. That
Mhm.
like touches my heart. And to your point of what you said, compassion and caring about people, kind of the thread of this entire conversation, that also takes time and it takes presence. And I don't know, again, I don't know if this is just because I'm getting older and I'm more sentimental now than I used to be, but I value time
Mhm.
over most things. I think that time is our most valuable resource and asset that we have. And so when someone gives you their time,
Mhm.
it is so valuable. When someone takes that moment to sit down with you and look you in the eye and show you compassion or cares about your day or asks you questions and how you're doing, I think that sometimes we brush those things off or we take those things for granted. But I think more now than ever, I start to recognize that, like, wow, if someone's really sitting down with me and they're taking that time to talk to me and to
Mhm.
care, that's a gift.
Absolutely, it certainly is, and that's kind of what we do with our students too. You just got to take the time. You got to spend time, and just one, it makes you do a better job, and then two, they're going to respect you in the long run. In the end.
Yeah. So I do want to, before we wrap for the day, I do want to talk about some of the things that you guys are doing organizationally and some of the things that are on the horizon. You are working on getting a canine dog.
Hmm.
Talk about
Yes.
this a little bit. Why are
Okay.
you getting a canine dog?
Back in the summer, I went to some training at a local resort in Young Harris. It's law enforcement training, and Cobb County Police had I guess it's called a peer support animal,
Mhm.
and the dog while I was in training, it was a doodle, it was a Bernie doodle, and it would just kind of approach everybody and just kind of it wanted petting, and it made the everything just so relaxed, and so and I thought, I said that would be so cool to have on a college campus, not just for the police officers and the faculty, but for the students, and one, it would increase our the awareness of us, and make us more, you make it back to them trusting us more, I think. And it's been a great thing so far. We got a dog. He's a I think he's a poodle pointer is what we figured out he was, but he is 11 months old now, but he's a lot bigger than we thought he was going to be. But he started out as like a real small puppy, and so he's kind of growing with us on the campus. So he's a little mischievous right now, but we're working on his manners and all that stuff before we get into like the therapy and peer support stuff. But as soon as we get done training, he'll be a full service animal that will be able to help with students in crisis and need, and anybody, not just students, because I want to use him for the community too, because
Mhm.
we're in a rural area and we don't have resources like that up here.
Yeah, I love that. I actually just had a conversation with another chief that said the best decision that he made in his career was getting a canine.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And this dog, he is. I love him to death. They grow on you, and I've got two doodles at home too. So, um, when they first introduced us to him, and he was already named Harris. So I thought, that's just fitting right there. So that's got to be the one.
Oh, his name was Harris
Yes.
before you got him.
Right.
It's fate.
Yeah, it was. I felt it was, and we bonded so well.
Oh, wow. Are you his full-time handler or someone else
I
in the
am. I
agency? You
am.
are. Okay. I love that. What have you seen as far as like the response within the agency or within your student community? Have you found that they're all puddles too and they're
Oh yeah,
loving
it's
them?
been very helpful, even though he's not fully trained in anything yet. We've had students come by and they're like, "Oh, he's going to be the new mascot for the college," or they just love him. They're like, "Oh, he made me feel better already," And so he has his certain visitors every day that come see him at the office, and we make it known, he's there. You won't come see him, come by anytime. You're never going to be a hindrance to us, and then even the officers love playing with him.
Yeah.
So it's been a great addition to the college and to our department.
I love that. I think that you
Mhm,
can't deny it. You can't deny like when you're around them. I've been to so many conferences where there's dogs and you just
mhm,
see everyone rolling around on the ground and it just
mhm,
makes everyone so happy. And I think if we're going to talk about connection and trust and building relationships, it's a really good way to bring those walls down
mhm,
and create like that space because I've seen some of the like toughest looking like SWAT looking guys
mhm.
and you see a dog and they're baby talking,
Oh yeah,
you
oh
know?
yeah. No, I'm a huge dog person, animal person in general,
Yeah.
but I just love dogs.
Was it easy to get the funding and the support for that, or how were you able to do that? Because I know that there are a lot of leaders who listen to this who maybe would also like to get a resource like that. How did you go about getting Little Harris?
Well, I approached my supervisor, which was the vice president of student development at the time, and then I went to our president, and luckily we've got a bunch of dog lovers at our campus, and he thought the idea was great, and so he's been very supportive, of everything. So
I
it's
love
we
it.
got a great team at the college.
Perfect. Well, my last question for you is for the younger generation. What words of wisdom would you share with them? I know you said that you kind of went through your ups and downs in your career and had some kind of self-assessment. So if you could rewind time and go back and speak to your younger self, what words of wisdom would you share?
A few things I would say, like treat everyone with dignity. Most people you meet are experiencing possibly the worst day in their life,
Mm,
and authority does not require disrespect. And then another thing was stay humble and ask questions.
I love it.
You got experiences earned, not rushed.
Yeah, I really like that. I like the stay humble, and kind of remember where you came from.
Because
Yeah.
you can get humbled real quick.
Well, thank you so much, Robbie, Chief Rich. Thank you for being here today. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an honor.
Of course.